Our relationships change the course of our lives, but can they change history? I'm the Affair Archivist, and welcome to part 2 of The Real Thing, Vivien Leigh and Laurence Olivier. Please note, this video contains a discussion of mental illness, pregnancy loss, suicide, and domestic violence. To view part 1 of the series, please click the link above. In the summer of 1944, Laurence Olivier was filming his directorial debut, Henry V, and Vivien Leigh was working on Caesar and Cleopatra. Vivien was in the early stages of pregnancy, but was still working on the film. While on set, Vivien slipped. Her doctor put her on bed rest, but unfortunately she miscarried 2 days later. She put up a brave front, assured that there were plenty more where that came from, but in reality was completely devastated by the loss and slipped into a depression. Larry was too consumed with Henry V to provide support for his wife. When she returned to work, she had a meltdown, and her moods would not stabilize for weeks. Larry was completely shocked by the turn in Vivien's behavior, but when it was over, he told himself it would not happen again. Around this period, Larry and Vivien bought an English estate called Notley Abbey for $1 million. The estate, which was about an hour outside of London, was a hub of artists, actors, writers, and intellectuals. Larry loved the estate and wrote of his longtime home. At Notley, I had an affair with the past. For me, it had a mesmeric power. I could easily drown in its atmosphere. I could not let it alone. I was a child lost in its history. Perhaps I loved it too much, if that is possible. Meanwhile, Vivien was in hot water with David O. Selznick for failing to return to the United States to fulfill her contractual obligations to him. He sued her, aiming to prevent her from appearing on the stage in London. Even though she won the case in 1945, she had to drop out of the play anyway, because she was diagnosed with tuberculosis. Though there was still no cure for tuberculosis in the 1940s, it was not the death sentence it was in earlier decades. However, she was only 31 years old at the time and would struggle with bouts of the illness for the rest of her life. Director Chester Erskine said, "Death was her partner from then on, although she cleverly and successfully concealed it. It ravaged her body, her mind, her spirit sometimes, and, in my personal opinion, her marriage as well." Larry was away in Germany at the time, but wrote to her often, expressing his concerns. His career was truly taking off, and he admitted he did not want to sacrifice it to take care of his wife. Still, when Vivien was in the hospital for 6 weeks, Larry visited her every morning, but he was not permitted to stay for very long. As Larry ascended to new heights, Vivien's career and life was under threat. As her physical health declined, so did her mental health. She had more manic episodes and lashed out at her husband. He did not know what to do. During a manic episode, Vivien gave away her possessions, including valuable jewelry and mink coats, yet she also attacked her mother. According to one friend, "I remember when we were staying over at Notley, and they had some terrible row that I was hearing through the walls, and Larry slammed out of the room, and about a half an hour later there was smoke, and Vivien had set the bed on fire." Larry's next Shakespearean film adaptation was Hamlet. Vivien wanted to once again play Ophelia, as she did on the stage about a decade earlier, but the producers insisted on a younger actress, as they tend to do. 18-year-old Jean Simmons won the role. Vivien was still involved in the production, giving him advice on how to adapt the play to the screen and helping him rehearse. But she was not credited for any of her contributions. Even worse, Larry developed feelings for his co-star. Vivien feared that one day her husband would leave her for a younger woman, just as she was losing roles to more youthful actresses. Luckily for Vivien, Simmons was in love with another man. Unluckily for Simmons, after rejecting Larry, he made her life hell on the set, dunking her in a stream over and over again while filming Ophelia's death scene. Reports noted that Olivier's obsession with perfection and greatness made the production difficult for most involved, but that when Vivien appeared on the set, it had a mellowing effect on him. On July 8, 1947, Larry was knighted, becoming Sir Laurence Olivier. Vivien was now Lady Olivier. Vivien was overwhelmed with happiness. As Larry recalled, Vivien, sitting nearby on a golden chair, was deeply moved. Her lovely eyes filled with tears of emotion, though she quickly brushed them aside and gave her radiant smile. Just as they had set out on a disastrous theater tour after the triumph of Gone with the Wind and Wuthering Heights, Vivien and Larry set out to Australia to go on tour after he was knighted. While things were off to a good start, they soon took a turn for the worse. Larry was feeling insecurity about aging. He was 41 years old and his lips were thinning. He had injured his legs while working on Richard III and ignored his doctor's orders to rest, believing that the injury would elevate his performance. Vivien struggled to breathe while en route to Brisbane, the next stop on the tour. The plane landed and she was rushed to the hospital. After she recovered, the couple got into an awful fight during rehearsals. Larry called her a bitch and slapped Vivien. She hit him back and called him a bastard. To make matters worse, Larry had ruptured cartilage in his leg and could not walk. He had surgery and headed home shortly afterwards. On the voyage back to England, they hardly spoke to each other. Vivien dressed revealingly, dancing and flirting with other men. She did not wait for him to board the boat. Olivier recalled, "Somehow, somewhere on this tour, I knew that Vivien was lost to me." Larry's hunch was correct. Not long after their return home in early 1949, Vivien told her husband that she did not love him anymore. It came like a small bolt from the blue, like a drop of water. I almost thought my ears had deceived me. I don't love you anymore. There's no one else or anything like that. I mean, I still love you, but in a different way, sort of. Well, like a brother. Larry felt as if he had been told I had been condemned to death, the central force of my life, my heart in fact, as if by the world's most skillful surgeon, had been removed. It left me aghast, but not gasping. It was as if I had been rendered forever still inside, like a fish in a refrigerator. She may have demoted him to brother status, but Larry said that occasional acts of incest were not discouraged. Vivien's mental health continued to decline, and she was still relegated to Olivier's shadow, though she was a constant presence on the London stage. The Oliviers lived a lavish lifestyle to their own financial detriment, and as is typically the case, none of the excessive spending helped either of them feel any better. Vivien's career received a huge boost when A Streetcar Named Desire, a smash hit in New York, was staged in London. As Blanche Dubois, the spotlight would once again be on Vivien, a decade after her triumph in Gone with the Wind. Larry believed the play was smut and did not want his wife to play a mentally ill sex addict, especially now that she was Lady Olivier. Nevertheless, he directed the production and encouraged Vivien to take the part. His relentless edits, alterations, and cuts to the play caused writer Tennessee Williams and producer Irene Selznick huge headaches throughout the process. The play was successful but began to attract an element that Vivien did not like or appreciate. People she believed had only bought tickets for the spectacle of her playing a nymphomaniac, rather than those who actually appreciated the theater. Though her performance received positive reviews overall, one critic, Kenneth Tynan, tore into her work, and it shook her confidence, triggering a manic episode. She tried to seduce the same critic that gave her the bad review when he stayed at the Olivier's manor by showing up in his room naked. In a quest for validation, she touched his groin. He rebuffed her advances, not wanting to cuckold Olivier, the actor he admired most, in his own home. According to Tynan, she pouted a bit and left the room. Vivien admitted that playing Blanche Dubois tipped me into madness. She wandered the streets at night, going to neighborhoods that were not safe for a woman of her class or level of fame. However, when she was offered to play Blanche in the film adaptation, she agreed and left for the United States in July of 1950. At first, Vivien felt like a fish out of water. She was working with actors that embraced the method, most notably Marlon Brando, and found it hard to find her footing. She and the director, Elia Kazan, did not mesh at first, but they eventually warmed up to each other. When Brando did an impression of Larry reciting the Battle of Agincourt speech, Vivien laughed heartily. Larry soon joined Vivien in LA to work on another project. Vivien's daughter, now a teenager, recalled. It was my first experience of them together, and very uncomfortable it was, too. What I remember most about my stay in Hollywood was the fights that went on between them, real theatrically pitched arguments behind closed doors. But in spite of the shouting matches, it never occurred to me that their marriage was breaking up. It was too precious to Vivien. I put it down to two overwrought people at the end of a long day's work on their separate movies. Vivien was straying from the marriage on the set of Streetcar, Brando claimed. Like Blanche, she slept with almost everybody and was beginning to dissolve mentally and to fray at the ends physically. I might have given her a tumble if it hadn't been for Larry Olivier. I'm sure he knew she was playing around, but like a lot of husbands I've known, he pretended not to see it. Vivien allegedly had an affair with Scotty Bowers, a notorious Hollywood gigolo who many decades later wrote a memoir about his exploits in Hollywood. He claimed that they had sex in George Cukor's guest house, but that they had to be careful because Cukor was a light sleeper. The next day, she sat brushing her hair in the mirror, unwilling to look at him, and that she locked herself in the bathroom and demanded he leave. When he did what she asked, she begged him not to go. Things did not improve when Larry and Vivien made their way back to England. In a misguided attempt to reconnect, they booked passage home on a cargo ship to minimize distractions. However, trapped amongst crates of fruits and vegetables with barely anyone else around, it was hard for them to recapture the spark that once burned so brightly. They were both incredibly bored and could barely stand one another. Larry wrote in his memoirs of this time. It's interesting how seldom life bestows equality of fortune in a man's public and private life. For the first time, the thought of suicide had its attractions. As if the strain between Larry and Vivien couldn't get any worse, Peter Finch arrived in London. Then an up-and-coming actor, the couple met Finch while on tour in Australia. Larry believed he was a promising young talent and encouraged him to move to the big city. Finch was then married to a ballerina named Tamara, who gave up her career to marry him. Unfortunately for Tamara and Larry, Vivien took a liking to Peter and began inviting him to Notley, then encouraged him to star in her film called Elephant Walk. He was hesitant to take the role at first, but eventually agreed. He and Vivien departed to Ceylon, Sri Lanka, to begin filming the picture. While boarding the plane, Finch wrapped his arm around Vivien, with Larry looking on. Soon after arriving in Sri Lanka, Vivien's mental health was in crisis. She begged Larry to visit her. She was in a major depression, and when she appeared on set, she was in a catatonic state. At night, she knocked on Finch's door without any clothes on. The producer begged Larry to visit his wife. He was vacationing in Italy at the time, but came to Vivien's aid. When he arrived, he could not find her. When she finally emerged, she told Larry she was having an affair with Finch. I could not find any blame in my heart for Peter. Was he not simply doing what I had done to her first husband 17 years ago? I found it pretty old-fashioned to work up any extra feelings of outrage. Some sources contradicted this graceful mindset and claimed that Larry was cold towards Finch and believed that he was the cause of her depression. Desperate, Larry contacted Holman. Vivien's ex-husband wrote a compassionate letter to her, an indication of how much he still cared for her. My darling Vivien, Larry rang up last night after he got back. I did not feel too happy about you from what he said. If you don't sleep properly, that film will wear you out. Don't waste all your nature in amusing other people as well as doing your work. If I think you are tired, I feel tired myself. Nothing helped, and Vivien went into a state of psychosis in which she could not tell the difference between her husband and lover. The production was moved to LA to be finished in a studio. The cast and crew flew back to Los Angeles. But this only triggered another breakdown for Vivien, who believed the cockpit was on fire, as it had been when they flew back to England in 1940. She fought anyone who tried to help her, and had to be sedated upon arrival. While in LA, Vivien and Peter were living in a house together. When his wife came to the city, Vivien warmly embraced her and told her to get ready for the guests that were coming over in an hour. David Niven and Elia Kazan, as well as other Hollywood luminaries, came over, but Vivien disappeared. A few hours later, the partygoers heard shouting from upstairs. Vivien was restrained by David Niven, calling out for Larry, screaming. After the commotion blew over, Tamara and Peter went to bed. Soon after, Vivien burst open the door, naked, and jumped into bed with them. Tamara wrote in her memoir, "Our bedroom door flew open, and a demented-looking Vivien, with her light robe open and disclosing her naked body, rushed to our bed with a tremendous energy and screaming obscenities tore off the bedclothes. On discovering us naked, she threw herself on Peter in great passionate embraces. He pushed her away, and she collapsed on the floor of the bed sobbing, shouting, 'You haven't told her! You haven't told her! How could you be sleeping with her, you monster? You're my lover!' Finch was enraged, Tamara shocked. He tried to remove himself from her embrace, but she wouldn't let go. After he broke free, she pushed him and tried to make him choose between her and his wife. He said that they would both remain married. One morning, Vivien appeared in Finch and Tamara's bedroom again. Tamara convinced her to return to her own room, where Vivien begged her for her forgiveness. She looked distressed and said she needed to be cuddled like a child. It made her unhappy, she said, that I was looking at her coldly. She wrung her hands, tried to arouse my sympathy, told me stories about her childhood, how, when the family lived in India, she had walked into a room when her parents were making love. It had given her the impression that her father was violating her mother. She deeply resented men, their selfishness, their superiority, their authority. Deep down, she wanted to avenge all women, wanted men to suffer for what they were doing to women. Vivien's mental health took such a stark turn for the worse that she tried to end her own life, according to Tamara, who claimed that she saved Vivien from drowning herself in the bathtub. She was removed from the film and replaced with Elizabeth Taylor, another younger actress. She had to be sedated for the flight back to England. The LA Times reported, the British actress, suffering a nervous breakdown and what a physician called a fear of flying, alternately sobbed and shook her fist at her husband until he and Danny Kaye each grabbed one of her arms and pulled her from the limousine and up the ramp to the plane floor. Vivien was treated with electroshock therapy at the psychiatric hospital she was taken to in Surrey, which caused her to lose some of her memory. She was in a coma for 4 days. When she awoke in a manic state, she was induced into another coma for 2 weeks. Larry went to Italy for vacation while Vivien was in the hospital. He felt guilty, but the doctor assured him that his presence may undermine her treatment. Unfortunately, when Larry returned, Vivien was not doing any better. I can only describe the changes by saying she was not, now that she had been given the treatment, the same girl that I had fallen in love with. Insofar as she was no longer the person that I had loved, I loved her that much less. She was now more of a stranger to me than I could have ever imagined possible. Instead of going back to Notley with Larry, Vivien went to recover with Holman when she was discharged from the hospital. Their divorce seemed to deepen their bond. On June 2, 1953, Queen Elizabeth was crowned Queen of England. Larry and Vivien attended the coronation to keep up appearances, assuring the public that Vivien had recovered and that their marriage was intact. Vivien told the press that she planned to take a step back from working and that her condition was due to exhaustion. I did some hard thinking while I was ill. I stared myself in the face and mapped out a new way of living. By August, however, she was starring in a new play with Larry. It was perhaps a bid to not only get back together professionally, but personally too. Larry began production of the film adaptation of Richard III. Again, a younger actress was cast in the role Vivien wanted. This time, Larry was actually unfaithful with his co-star, Claire Bloom, who was in her mid-20s at the time, while Olivier was pushing 50. Bloom admitted to the affair in her memoir, which was published in 1996. She believed that though he may stray, Larry would always love Vivien above all. This wasn't quite true, however, because Larry had yet another affair with 22-year-old actress Dorothy Tootin, while Vivien continued seeing Finch. He promised to marry her, but Vivien found out and insisted on meeting the actress. When she did, she threatened to end her own life, and Dorothy broke off her relationship with Larry. He kept her last love letter to him in his wallet for years after the affair ended. Meanwhile, not only was Finch still intimate with Vivien, he was living in one of Olivier's homes and was a frequent presence at Notley. Larry eventually confronted him. However, neither of them took it seriously and began laughing until Vivien burst into the room and demanded that one of them sleep with her. Larry finally put his foot down and told her she had to choose. Vivien claimed she chose Larry because Finch's fingernails were dirty. Dirty fingernails did not, in fact, end their affair, despite Larry's ultimatum. Finch moved in with his mother in Chelsea, who did not object to Vivien's visits to her home to be with Peter. In July of 1956, Vivien discovered she was pregnant but did not know who the father was. While Larry thought it could reinvigorate their marriage, overall he felt it was done and was torn on whether to be happy about the child or not. In August, Vivien had another miscarriage, which nearly killed her. Their marriage would continue running on fumes for a few more years. Vivien was in denial, Larry was ambivalent. He knew nothing was the same, but struggled to cut the cord with the woman he once loved so much, who was suffering so deeply. In 1957, as he napped, Larry was abruptly awoken by being slapped in the face with a wet rag, brandished by Vivien. Larry locked himself into another room, but she relentlessly banged on the door. Finally, he hit his breaking point and grabbed her wrist, pushed her along the passage, threw open the door, and with all my strength, it must be true that in an all-possessing rage it is doubled, hurled her halfway across the room to the bed. Before hitting the bed, she struck the outside corner of her left eyebrow on the corner of her marble bedside tabletop, opening up a wound 1/2 an inch from her temple and 1/2 an inch from her eye. I realized with horror that each of us was quite capable of murdering or causing the death of the other. With their marriage all but over, Vivien went on vacation to Italy with Holman and Suzanne. When she returned, they lived separately. Given she and Larry's fame as actors and as a couple, she was criticized by the press and even some politicians for doing so. Their status in England was only second to the King and Queen at this time, and the thought of them divorcing was unfathomable to the British public. The final nail in the coffin of Vivien and Larry's marriage came when Larry starred in a stage production called The Entertainer. He worked alongside actress Joan Plowright, who was 27 years old and married at the time. They soon fell in love. It seems Larry couldn't be in a long-term relationship unless his partner was already married when they met. When Vivien saw the show in Glasgow, she immediately sensed that there was something more than just a professional relationship between them. Not long after, Larry admitted that he was in love with Joan. According to Joan, "We told each other everything about our past history and the present state of our marriages. He confided that he had suggested divorce to Vivien 2 years ago, but that she had vehemently opposed it and even threatened to take her own life if he went ahead. She wanted the legend of the marriage to continue, though she conceded that each of them could be free to enjoy liaisons elsewhere. He was adamant that their life together was over and that there was no going back. It was hoped that after a time of separation, she would recognize the futility of keeping up the pretense and possibly finding a new love of her own." Larry, though he still loved Vivien, could no longer deal with her mental illness and her mood swings. She asked to meet Joan, but Larry, learning his lesson from Tootin, refused. Vivien tried to comfort herself by having other affairs of her own. On a vacation in Italy, she tried to bring a fisherman back to her hotel room. He was refused entry by the employees, and she had a meltdown that culminated in her biting a police officer's fingers. It is likely that only her fame prevented her from being arrested. Vivien went back and forth in accepting the end of the marriage. In one letter to Larry, she was resolute that they must go their separate ways. "A clear and absolute break is the only path to follow, so I intend to divorce you on the grounds of desertion, mental and physical, as soon as both of our personal chores in the theater and television are over. We are, in any case, separated. I did not want to do this to you until you finished your work here, but our telephone conversation tonight led me to think I was talking to a complete stranger, which is what you have chosen to become. I think our lives will lie in quite different directions. I feel confident I shall make my own life. You have always made yours." She did change her mind, however. Finally, in 1958, Larry sat her down to dinner in London and asked for a divorce point blank. She wrote to a friend, "Larry has asked for a legal separation. It is a very great and terrible shock, and I am, and have been acutely miserable. I always thought that whatever happened between us, eventually we would be completely together as we used to be. It has always seemed that with a sense of humor and innate loyalty and respect and love, one would pull through anything. I shall never love anyone as I love him." Preparing for their divorce, the Oliviers sold Notley in February of 1959. Vivien told Tarquin, "I can hardly write the words. I walk from place to precious place and gaze at the beloved views with tears pouring down my face. What memories for all one's life! Such unbelievable rare happiness, sweetness and quietude there has been here. I don't forget the other times too, but they seem to me outweighed by blissful together. Dear God, it is a heartache." In her loneliness, Vivien reached out to Finch. Over the years, their affair fizzled out, but she wanted to resume it. However, in the time since they last spoke, he had left Tamara for another woman and did not respond to her letters. Vivien asked his mother to set up a meeting between them at home. Finch arrived with his new wife, who was pregnant at the time, and Vivien begged him to return to her. He told her it was too late. After years of back and forth, of changed minds and numerous affairs, a statement was finally released by the Oliviers in May of 1960. Lady Olivier wishes to say that Sir Laurence has asked for a divorce in order to marry Miss Joan Plowright. She will naturally do whatever he wishes. In the aftermath of the announcement, Joan received insults and death threats from the public for ending the Oliviers' marriage. Larry and Vivien, however, ended things on overall good terms. Vivien wrote to him, "Pussycat, my darling, whatever may happen, let us be friends, my dearest one. Perhaps all the interim mistakes have made just too much difference in our life together. I do not know, and you must leave it to me to do what I think is best for the future and in my own time. It will take me a little while to decide. One does not simply let 25 years go by lightly. I feel very deeply in love with Jack, and very dearly grateful to him, but it does not alter the fact that I shall love you all my life, and with a tenderness and respect that is all-embracing. Take care of your precious dear self. My dear, dear heart, Vivling." Larry wrote back, "Darling, I want to say thank you for undergoing it all for my sake. You did nobly and bravely and beautifully, and I am oh so very sorry that it must have been such hell for you, and I am very dearly grateful for you enduring it and setting me free to enjoy what is infinitely happy for me. Oh God, Vivling, how I do pray that you will find happiness and contentment now. I pray constantly that I may take off from you some of your unhappiness unto myself, and I must say it seems to work from this end, as your unhappiness is a torment to me, and the thought of it a constant nightmare. Perhaps now it may be allowed to gently lift and blow softly away." Larry married Joan on March 17, 1961 in Connecticut. Vivien was on the set of a new project when she received the news and was devastated. She was still holding out hope for reconciliation. However, she did find another partner, Jack Merivale, an actor she met in New York shortly before she and Larry divorced. In the coming years, her health would steadily decline, and Merivale was by her side through all of it. She continued to struggle with her mental health, attacking a co-star on stage during a live performance in 1963. Larry visited her as she recovered. However, he wanted to keep his distance from her and began writing less and less. She came to see him to perform on stage one evening. However, after the show, he refused to see her, claiming he had lost his voice. Vivien had tears in her eyes and said Larry had never lost his voice before. In May of 1967, Vivien was again stricken with a bout of tuberculosis. The treatment for the illness was grueling, with patients having to take 24 pills for 24 hours, leading to side effects of nausea and stomach aches. Vivien refused to subject herself to this. It seems she chose to allow her affliction to slowly diminish her and take her away, perhaps to end her own suffering. On July 7th, 1967, Vivien fell asleep with her cat snuggled beside her. She was later found on her bedroom floor, her illness having consumed her at the age of 53. Larry, who was battling prostate cancer at the time, went over to Vivien's house to see her after her passing. He reflected, "It has always been impossible for me not to believe that I was somehow the cause of Vivien's disturbances, and that they were due to some fault in me. I stood and prayed for forgiveness for all the evils that had sprung up between us." Larry had 3 children with Joan and continued to thrive professionally for decades, establishing himself as one of the foremost actors in the world. He did have another affair, this time with an 18-year-old actress, who said of her lover, "He loved living on the edge, seeing me whenever he could. That's life at its utmost. He loved that feeling of naughtiness, and he did like danger." Despite his success, Vivien would always haunt him. One biographer noted, "It was Vivien's illness that made Olivier the great actor he became. He was forced to engage with overpowering emotions and to acknowledge that willpower was not the solution to everything." Larry died in 1989 at the age of 82. He was buried in Westminster Abbey. Despite living a long life full of success, Olivier revealingly told his son Richard, "I've played over 200 parts in my life, and I know them all better than I know myself." He undoubtedly struggled with his decision to leave his and Vivien's marriage until the end of his days. Their love may have been the real thing, but he admitted it could not withstand the pressures of time and mental illness. You can reach a point where it's like a life raft that can only hold so many. You cast away the hand grasping it. You let go. You do not take it on board because otherwise it's both of you. 2 instead of 1. Then you go on living, and there you are, with it, knowing what has happened, remembering its details. Yet what else is there to do? Thank you very much for watching. I'm the Affair Archivist. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. And join me next time as we explore another affair from history.